Suzanne, great to see you again as we continue these amazing conversations that we've been having over these last few weeks. I'm very excited about today's topic. We are talking about how to lead from within, lead change, by leaning into the power of self-awareness and really dive into that. And so I know that you know about this power of self-awareness because you talk about it in your book, How to Do the Inner Work. But how did you learn about the importance of self-awareness? What was it that got you there?
Annmarie, and I would like to say that it was a gradual process, and I think all of this work is gradual, but actually that there was a very key moment for me when I think everything changed. And this is 15 years ago. I was a hardworking manager. I was very stressed out, and I was very fortunate. I was invited to go on a leadership program sponsored by work. And that's when I had my first ever coaching session. So I was not the coach, I was being coached. And I came to the session saying, help, I'm hardworking, I'm exhausted. The hardworking wasn't the problem, but I was exhausted. That was a problem. What shall I do? And I am not exaggerating when I said that within the space of this 1 hour coaching session, I had a complete light bulb moment, just an aha moment, because the person on the other side asked a few simple questions and something happened when that person asked these questions. I can't remember anymore what questions he asked, but I realized, wow, and this is, guess, the self-awareness. I realized that if I question my thoughts, if I choose another thought, my whole reality is going to change. So let's say my thought was, I have to work late, I have to work hard, I have to, whenever somebody is working from my team, I have to be there to support them. That's literally how I felt. I did not want to go home if one of my team members was working. I wanted to set the good example. And so the aha moment was, oh my God, if I choose another thought, like I can go home at 5 p.m., then I can go home at 5 p.m. It's only my thought that is keeping me away. I'm just a thought away from changing my whole life. And that's actually what happened. So from that moment onwards, I started studying coaching. And of course, that was a deep, deep, deep dive into self-awareness. So that's the answer to your question.
That's brilliant. Yeah, it's just the whole process of being able to recognize that you're in control and you can actually change it. And I do feel like we talked about some of this in our very first session around how people feel disempowered and they feel like they're in this environment and they're unable to shift. And I do think that part of this work is actually bringing back your inner power and recognizing that you have autonomy, you have agency, and you can make that shift, which is really important. Well, I wanted to share a couple of quotes to open up. I'm rereading Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and it's such a brilliant book. It was one of the books I read back in 2016, 2017, where I was really starting on my journey. And he says, and I'm just going to get the quote here, awareness is the greatest agent for change. And so I love that. Awareness is the greatest agent for change. And then I also love Robin Sharma's books. He wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, The 5 a.m. Club, Everyday Hero. And he says, awareness precedes choice and choice precedes change. Yeah, you got his book. So yeah, Power of Now, you got both of the books. Brilliant. And so these are awesome books. If anybody hasn't read them, they're great to just sort of read. And as you're embarking on this journey to help improve your awareness and help improve your emotional intelligence, it really does help to start to fill your brain with voices like these, because it just helps you see things from a different angle. And the more diverse voices that you can bring in, the more that you can start to see it from different perspectives. And it really helps be supportive on a journey for change. Even if you're listening to them or listening to similar podcasts in your car as you're driving, try to sort of fill your head and your space with these voices of just great change masters. So Robin Sharma's statement is awareness precedes choice and choice precedes change. Ultimately, you can't change what you're not aware of. And if you're sort of watching this video and you've watched some of our earlier videos, you know that we've talked about this, but it's so important, we wanted to put a whole session together talking about awareness today. And so you have to be able to to be the change, live the change, and just sort of be aware so that you can change it. And we talked about this in our last session on emotions. We talked about how important it is to be able to walk the walk, not just sort of know what emotional intelligence is intellectually, but to be aware of how you're showing up and where you are on sort of the change curve yourself and where you're placed emotionally, and then how you shift and create that space. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I think the one thing I want to call out is that I feel like we are so busy. We all tend to be busy. If you ask someone how they are, most often they answer, oh, great, busy. Like this is sort of this de facto mode. It's like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm busy, busy, busy. I'm busy, busy, busy. And so I do think that habitually and unconsciously, we spend our time being busy so that we don't actually have to pause and feel. And sometimes feeling can feel hard, right? Feeling an emotion can feel hard. And this isn't a therapy session, so we're not trying to go there. But you know, we tend to move unconsciously, keeping our busy habits and running from meeting to meeting and filling our calendars unconsciously and complaining about our back-to-back meetings, but at the same time continuing to keep that habit in play unconsciously. And that sort of stops us from being aware and in the moment and emotionally tuned in. And if you're emotionally tuned in, you start to feel the emotions, and sometimes that can not feel quite good because you have to feel them in order to move through them. And so I think it's really important, especially like for all individuals, for anybody in the world, right? As humans, I think this is really important. I think it's critically important if you're a leader leading a team and you really want to move from that manager mindset that we talked about in an earlier episode to a leadership mindset. This awareness is critically important in how you make that jump, and just being aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your words, your tone, your energy. Being self-aware of all of that is super important as a leader within organizations. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around all of that, Suzanne, around unconscious leadership. And we had a lot that I just said there, but the keeping busy, the unconscious leadership, and how that affects us. What are your thoughts on that? What do you see?
You know, this thing about being busy really resonates. We wear this as a badge, you know, like I'm busy, and it's kind of a code word for I'm important and I matter. But we often fill our lives up with stuff so we don't have to feel. And you mentioned my book earlier, and actually one of the reasons why I wrote this book, How to Do the Inner Work, is for exactly that. Help us sit down and actually feel what we're feeling and be with what is. That's actually a big part of mindfulness. So I wanted to say that. And also you mentioned the two very important books, The Power of Now and Robin Sharman's, you know, books that I have on my bookshelf too. But the one book that I actually really want to mention as well, because it's called just Awareness. It's not a new book. It is, I would say, probably a classic. I really recommend it for everyone. It's just so interesting to read, because Anthony DeMello, who is no longer with us, he just says, don't worry about anything, just be aware. Once you're aware, everything else will change. And it's a quick read, and I really recommend it. But you ask about unconscious leadership, was that the term you used?
Yeah. Unconscious leadership or unconscious busyness, right?
Yeah. Well, of course, as you know, I coach quite a few managers who want to improve their emotional intelligence and their self-awareness. And I think in terms of examples, we can probably all relate to this bull in a china shop. Because a bull in a china shop, I would say somebody who is quite insensitive. They are not tuned into their own emotions. So they're not really self-aware, or if they're self-aware, they choose to ignore it. And because they're not so self-aware and aware of their own emotions, they're also not able to tune into others. And they don't have that kind of situational awareness. They're just a bulldozer. And I think we can all relate to that person. But I would like to give another example too, which is perhaps a little less obvious. And that is a person, in this case, let's say a manager, because we were talking about leadership, unconscious leadership, a manager who wants to please, somebody who has difficulty saying no, somebody who has difficulty setting boundaries. And perhaps because I want to please, I don't want to upset people. I coach a lot of people who have this. So they're worried about falling out. And they're worried that if they say no, they're going to break the relationship. They're worried that if they have a conflict, God forbid, if they have a conflict, that they're going to break the relationship. So we think of this person could be quite pleasant. It might even be somebody who's a good listener, but they're still not self-aware enough to be with their emotions and to actually express those emotions in an appropriate way. Because suppressing is not where we want to go with this. We want managers and leaders who lead consciously, and so they know that even if this is uncomfortable, I need to express my needs. I need to express some of what needs to be expressed, basically some demands. We all have boundaries. We all have demands of each other, and that's okay. And another word that we like to use in this context in for leadership coaching is blind spots. You know, if we're not self-aware, the inversion of that is that we have many blind spots. And that's why in the workplace we do 360 reviews. We ask for feedback from other people. It helps to lower our amount of blind spots and to increase our self-awareness. So, and you know what, Annmarie, I might even go as far as saying that the majority of managers out there have blind spots. The majority of managers could do with more self-awareness. And also, let's remind people, we're talking about a continuum, right? It's not that I'm either unconscious or I'm either conscious. It's like a gradual process.
Yeah, that a lot of great examples. I want to touch just really briefly on the suppression of the thoughts and how that manifests. And over the last couple of years, I've been advising a number of executive C-level who are in this mode of, people are leaving in the environment, people are leaving the organization, people are burnt out and stressed out. So they've been really challenged with, well, how do I hold my organizational folks, how do I hold my leaders accountable? How do I drive towards that accountability while still being empathetic and understanding of their situation? And that's been a very hard walk for leaders to make. And I think that comes back again to being able to recognize that your own fear and what's holding you back, and being able to drive that accountability forward and have those conversations, and just being able to go into those conversations with openness and curiosity around what might be going on for somebody. And I often find that people want to be self-accountable. This is a whole other topic, but often their expectations and their leaders' expectations are not aligned. So if you as a leader go into those conversations with openness and curiosity, you're probably going to find your way to a better alignment and a better conversation that can start to open the doors. So this self-awareness and these EQ skills of being able to build your openness, your curiosity, and have those conversations is really important in your ability to lead and manage the work as well. But the bull in the china shop is interesting. I sort of laughed at that because, I think on our last episode, I told a story about how I rescued projects. Absolutely was the bull in the china shop, and and wore that badge with honor, right? There wasn't a project that I couldn't rescue. And so very egotistical, right? And I wouldn't really see myself as an egotistical person. I wasn't driven by power. I wasn't driven by what I saw in the organizations I worked for. There were a lot of people who were driven by power. I was driven by being able to do the right thing for the organization. But it's a very egotistical sort of mindset. Now that I know what I know, like that's really sort of ego's in the driving seat. And when ego's in the driving seat, that mindfulness aspect of ourselves tends to go to the wayside. And sort of being present, being mindful, being self-aware is really important to lead from that more heart-centered place, which I think is really important in today's world. So, all right, so great examples. We talked about sort of the busy hustle culture, and I've sort of been there just hustling along, being busy, rushing from meeting to meeting. And the other thing I noticed you know, in this conversation is how critical I was of myself and how judgmental I was of myself in those situations as a young leader, a young manager, working and navigating my way through. And so very often I would without knowing, because I wasn't self-aware. So I wasn't aware that I was in fear of what I might produce, or I was in fear and self-judgment around what people thought of me. Now looking back, I can see that. And there's one term that I've said to myself, and I try to say to every group that I'm in front of, because there's always someone in the group that needs to hear it. And that's, you know, what other people think of me or the stories that other people tell themselves about me is none of my business. So what other people think about me is none of my business. And that, I don't mean that I don't care what people think of me and I can just be the bull in the china shop. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I'm not going to ruminate anymore. And I've had my times where I've been like leading these complex projects, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake ruminating over a conversation I had with a leader, and ruminating about what that person might think of me, and ruminating about how I'm going to address it tomorrow. And if they say this, I'm going to do that. And like spending that time in my head, affecting my sleep, affecting my well-being, ruminating over those situations. Well, I don't do that anymore. I park that, and I've become aware that, you know, we all have the capacity to be self-critical and judgmental. And when when we allow that chatter to sort of increase in volume in our heads, we allow ourselves to be critical and judgmental of other people too. So pull that all back and really sort of say to yourself, you know what, you know, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to move through this world. I'm going to move through this work, keeping doing all of the things that I know how to do, and doing it to the best degree possible. And I'm going to be authentic, and I'm going to be open. I'm going to try to be myself as much as possible. And it might not be perfection, and that's okay. Giving myself grace to show up as I am and do the best that I can. Might not hit perfection every time. That's okay. I'm not going to worry about what people think of me, and I'm certainly not going to spend time ruminating over it. And so self-awareness can be that gift also, to stop that chatter in your head and give yourself some peace and calm when you choose to not be so worried about it. And, you know, I notice now when if I feel like I'm self-critical, I can redirect myself pretty quickly. And if I notice I'm judging other people, I try to laugh at myself, because that's always good, right? Injecting some humor sort of changes your energy, and go, oh, like, look at you, Annmarie, judgy again. I thought judgy Annmarie went away. Where, oh, there she's back. She's, hello, judgy Annmarie. You can go away now. I don't want to be that person. And so I sort of try to inject a little bit of humor and laugh at myself a little bit, so that I'm not being critical of myself, being critical of others, right? Because that's not the energy I want to spend my time in. So recognizing and being self-aware of how you're showing up, I think, is really important. And so I'd love to hear what you think, Suzanne, about, you know, the self-criticism and how that lines up, how judgment and non-judgment lines up with EQ and self-awareness.
Yeah, and just a little side comment there, because we might want to do another episode on how to stop worrying, because what you're describing there, that you've gone from recognizing when you worry and just put it on the side, is, I'm sure, a skill that many listeners would like to acquire, because we all recognize that, right? And then it's like this record that keeps going, and you're digging yourself into a further hole. So that's a little aside. But yeah, you mentioned there the being self-critical or judgmental. And the way that I think about it at the moment is that we definitely have to be careful not beating ourselves up. I mean, you said grace there. You know, we need to give ourselves grace. Yeah, I'm not perfect, and that's okay. And it goes for this situation as well, because if we say, oh no, I must not be judgmental, then we essentially just adding more fuel to the fire. And I would say the mind is excellent at dissecting, analyzing, finding faults. That's what the mind is good at. The mind is excellent at judging and labeling others. And, you know, because listen, there is so much information every single day. The amount of billions of bits of information that we goes through our unconscious mind is mind-boggling. So we need this brilliant mind to judge what is important, what's not important, what do I need to pay attention to, what don't I? So I say, let the mind be judgmental. However, can I notice it? Because if I don't notice that I'm being judgmental in a critical leadership situation, I can make a completely wrong decision. I can make a wrong assumption. I can become reactive and narrow-minded and just take my team in the wrong direction, or jeopardize an important relationship. So this is where the self-awareness comes in again. Can I notice, I'm being very critical of that person showing up in this way right now, for instance, or critical of myself? Because if I can notice it, I can create this distance and become like this observer and say, okay, this is going on. I am noticing myself being judgmental. That's okay. Can I distance myself from it? Can I look at it from a different angle? So is this judgment or judgmental mindset, is it helping me or is it hindering me? Maybe it's good in this situation. Maybe it's not good in another situation. Because I think there's no absolutes, right? There's no either good or bad. It is just that situation. If I can become aware, then I have choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I think of it at the moment. It's that dance and that awareness in the moment. Taking an informed decision, what do I do with it? It's like any emotion, right? I feel anger or sad or whatever I feel. Well, it's neither good nor bad. But what do I want to do with it in this situation? And also maybe just very briefly, the role of self-compassion here. It's a little bit like grace, I feel. Can I have self-compassion if I, for instance, am too self-critical? Because it will lower, it will down-regulate my nervous system. And maybe again, that's a different conversation. But that was my thoughts on this question you asked me.
We could just spend all day talking about all of these topics and go in 10 different tangents and 10 different directions. So it's so good. But we're trying to stay focused. I think we're being very good at trying to stay focused. So I think, so just to recap, so I agree, right? Developing awareness and being non-judgmental, that goes hand in hand. So, there's a statement here in the States, cut yourself some slack. Be graceful, be compassionate with yourself, focus on progress over perfection. And just notice, inject that space and notice where you're being self-critical or critical of others. That's really important. But I'd love to switch. So in all of our conversations, we've talked about awareness. And in our last conversation, we talked about really deepening our awareness of our emotions and really starting to really understand and feel our emotions and deepen the awareness of how we're showing up and how we're feeling. I'd love to talk a little bit more today about energetic awareness, because I think this is so important. So I think I mentioned on a previous, maybe the introduction, that I've become certified to teach the HeartMath course, Resilience Advantage. And I teach this for teams, and it's really helping people understand how their neurochemistry works, how their neurons work, their brains work, how their bodies work, their biology, and how all of that lines up together. And so one of the concepts that we teach in this program, and it's all based on evidence and science, is relational energetics. And so we teach about the heart, and we teach about how the heart creates energy around us. And so Suzanne, have you ever walked into a room and felt that like the energy was off, or gotten on a call and just you get this sort of feeling that there's something sort of off in the room, or maybe you talk to somebody and you feel like their energy's off, and then later find out that they've just gotten a call with bad news or something like that? Have you ever been in any of those situations?
Yeah, definitely. But as you're speaking there, I'm also thinking that because we're multisensory, of course, we have all our senses. I hesitate to say five because I don't know how many senses we have. But of course, we get all these cues, right? So if we are sensing a person's energy, I guess we judge very quickly their tone of voice, how they speak, what they say, what they don't say, what they do, what they don't do. But I guess what you're talking to here is different, is the energetic level. So in my previous year, I might not have distinguished. Yes, I noticed that something is off, but do I pick it up because of something they're saying, or do I pick it up because of something that the way that that they're walking or how they're standing or whatever. Because it's a complex field, isn't it? All the things that we pick up from a person. But specifically to your point about energy, there are definitely some people, and I notice this probably more in my circle of friends, that there are some people who definitely can have a tendency to drain me. And there are some other friends who I find very uplifting to be with. And that is not dependent on what they say. It is simply, I think, more what you're alluding to, this field of energy around them. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so
Mm.
I'm gonna let me share a little bit about the science. I won't dive too deep, but I do think it's really helpful for people to understand some of it so that they can start to become aware of it. So our heart, every time our heart beats, our heart produces electricity, and that can be measured. And when we produce electricity, we create a magnetic field around the electricity. That's basic physics. Now, I didn't really dive deep into physics in school, so don't ask me to explain it any more deeply than that, right? But our heart beats, it produces electricity, and then that produces a magnetic field. And the HeartMath Institute has done a lot of research into this. And so they've used tools to be able to measure the magnetic field. And so the tools that they've used measure it at least at 3 feet from the body. They think it probably goes beyond 3 feet, but the tool limitation is 3 feet. So they know it's at least 3 feet. So we produce this field. You can think about it as your personal field environment that's around our body. And so that acts as a carrier wave of information. So our thoughts, our feeling, our energetic level, the emotions we're feeling, that carries out into the wave. The same way that a television set, if you think about your television set, there's a radio wave or a frequency wave that goes to the television set that carries the picture and it carries the sound. So in the same way, and that's invisible too, right? The same into our cell phones, right? So all of that's invisible to us, but we believe in it because we can see it working in front of us. So the heart and this field, this personal energy field that we have around us works in the same way. So our emotions, how we're feeling, what we're thinking, the heart rate, or the way our heart is beating, and whether it's a regular, calm, coherent heartbeat, or whether it's an irregular heartbeat that's more associated with stress, and that could be a whole other conversation by itself. But the way our heart is beating influences the information that's going out into the field. And scientists have actually been able to predict how someone is feeling, and their emotional feeling, by their heartbeat and how their heart is beating, up to like 75% accuracy. So this is very real. There's a lot of great science backing it up, and I personally love that because I'm a scientific girl. I love facts and figures, and so I always sort of am drawn to programs like this that have the scientific backing. So in a nutshell, you talked about being drained by someone's energy, and you're probably feeling their inherent emotions and how they're showing up. And it goes back, if we tie this back to maybe above the line and below the line, we talked about when you're above the line, you're sort of maybe glass half full, you're more open, you're more curious, and you're showing up in a way that's got a higher energy level. If you think about the emotions that we shared in the last session, the emotions that were on the right hand, I can't remember the colors, but they were sort of like low, feeling calm, feeling confident, or the high emotions of happiness and joy. That's above the line. And the emotions of being disconnected or isolated or worried or angry and frustrated, that's below the line. And so that, if you sort of shift that around, our energy is the same way. So if we're in below the line, our energy is going to reflect that, and people around us are going to feel a little bit more drained from being with us, regardless of what we're saying or how we're acting, because that energy tells its own story. And so it comes back to trying to be sort of authentic and being aware. And so if you're aware of how you're feeling and you're aware of those emotions, and you can use some of the techniques we've been teaching so far to state shift, to shift into a different emotional well-being, then that's going to be reflected in your energy. And everybody else around you, whether they're on a call or whether they're in in a room with you. You don't have to be in proximity of someone, right? And start, I sort of urge people to play with this a little bit, right? So test out what we're saying as you go into your next conference call, or as you have a meeting with someone. Just test this out, right? Start to see, can you discern and sort of notice the energy that you're feeling or how you're feeling personally? Can you start to become aware of it? Because, you know, as I'm saying, this is all backed by science, but it's fascinating. I sort of dive way down the rabbit hole in trying to understand this, because I find it really fascinating, and I can see it and become aware of it in my own life. And so each of us, to recap, each of us essentially is broadcasting this information on how we're feeling. And so the question then becomes, what are you feeding the field? Are you, you know, if you're in a situation where there's drama going on around you, are you adding fuel to that fire of the drama? Are you fueling the fire? Are you adding sticks and kindling into that fire and magnifying the drama by your own energy and how you're showing up? Or are you sort of the calming influence on the fire, dampening it down and putting the fire out so that you can sort of move people through a conversation around what might the root cause of whatever caused the fire be? And so I think that's a question that people can ask themselves on a daily basis, is what am I feeding the field today? What energy am I showing up with? And sort of link that to the emotional awareness that we talked about in our last session. And again, just start this journey of becoming more aware of how you're feeling, how you're thinking, how you're acting, but also what you might be pushing out into the field. So I don't know, Suzanne, how does that resonate with you when we talk about those energetics?
Yeah, well, that was a lot there. But I love that. What are you feeding the field? Because what we are advocating is, of course, that people are taking, I think people like to use the word agency, right? Let's take it. I want to feel agency. And that begins with the self-awareness piece and choosing how I show up. Yes, there are circumstances, right? But he did that to me, or I didn't get that promotion, or whatever it is. So I have the right to feel the way I do, and I have the right to show up the way I do. Yeah, you have the right, but be aware of the impact of how you show up on other people. So we have a choice, and yeah, so it absolutely resonates. And I don't want to kind of recap what you said. I think that was quite clear, but I do want to encourage people to also check out HeartMath. We mentioned the Institute a number of times. Is powerful. There are lots of videos also on YouTube on this, or wherever you get your information from. So yeah, it's powerful stuff, really powerful stuff. And we shared the coherence breathing technique in a previous episode, so check back on that one as well.
Yeah, and they have a great podcast. So again, about filling your head full of information coming from different directions. The HeartMath podcast is a great podcast to listen to, short sessions. And I want to talk about one thing as well. So, you know, we talked about how you show up is reflected in your energetics. But if you're disconnected or distracted or disengaged, so imagine you show up on a conference call and everybody's off camera and you're talking, but you just get this sense that nobody's actually here. Is anybody actually paying attention? So that comes across in your energetics too. Like you can feel when people aren't present. You can feel if you're in a conversation with someone and they look like they're listening to you, but they're off in their head thinking about something else or thinking about how they're going to respond. That comes across in the energetics. People can feel that. So as a leader, I think, again, become super aware of your presence and bringing your presence into the moment and just being able to navigate away from all the distractions around you and give everybody, whoever you're talking to, whoever you're on a conference call with, give them the gift of your full presence, because I think that's super important, and that plays into our energy and awareness as well. And I, you know, will be the first to say that yes, there's times when I'm on conference calls and I'm distracted or I'm doing something over here. There's times where I'm showing up on camera and people can see that I'm doing that, or that I notice that I'm doing that, and I deliberately have to sort of pull myself back in and focus in. So, you know, we all do it, but, you know, let's try to become aware of it. I think it's really important. And I want to say just one thing, I think, before we go to a tool, is that awareness creates that choice point. So if you can become aware of how you're feeling, how you're acting, how you're behaving, what you're resisting, what's coming up for you, what you might be feeding the field, like if you can become aware of that, you can inject space in there to create a choice point for you. Do you just continue to unconsciously do this? Do you sort of railroad over how you're feeling, and do you just keep going down that path, or do you choose to say, oops, you know what, here's an opportunity for me to do something different, and let me go down this path of maybe starting to ask open questions, or noticing, hey, I need to become more present here, or just saying, hey, you know what, I was really distracted during that call, can you just tell me that again, and I'm here fully present with you, and just shift into a different conversation. So I think taking that time to respond and taking that time to inject that space is really important. And I know our next conversation is going to be continuing down the path of emotional intelligence, talking about self-regulation. So we'll probably spend a lot more time talking about how to do that on our next conversation. But let's move. We want to give everybody a tool. So, Suzanne, do you want to share the tool that we have for everybody today?
Well, I think just want to maybe speak to the fact that there are many different ways of raising our self-awareness. I think we mentioned one before, which is the 360 reviews, asking for feedback. That's very powerful because self-awareness, you know, we can chip away at it in different ways. One way that has helped me with my self-awareness over the years has actually been working with a therapist. That's almost like self-awareness on steroids, you know, especially in the space of emotions. Am I able to recognize my emotions? Am I aware of what I'm putting out there? Am I aware of my state? You know, just talking that through with somebody is incredibly powerful. And just it's making me reflect as well on what works for me with my own self-awareness. And because I'm a coach, I actually gain a lot of self-awareness from coaching others. And I'm aware that people listening might not be coaching others, but in conversation with others, if we are present, we obviously build our self-awareness too. Okay. A tool that I think we can all use and we want to encourage people to use is journaling. And journaling comes in a few different forms. And I'm going to mention two different forms. One is, I think, the traditional journaling that we think of. So you can write down whatever you're doing or thinking or feeling. And if you write on a regular basis, you can later go back and read your words and you realize that, oh my God, that's not an issue anymore. And oh my God, did I used to think like that? Oh, so you can actually see that you are progressing. So that's a really great way, not just to build your self-awareness, but also to almost like transition through and create some distance between your thoughts and emotions and yourself. And the other journaling practice that I actually write about in my book as well, is expressive writing. And expressive writing is a little different, or it's a more specific form of journaling. It's a type of journaling where you just write down anything that's on your mind this very moment, all your thoughts, all your feelings, whatever. You don't filter, you don't stop and reflect on what to write, you just write. It's almost like a purge. You just put it down on paper and then you tear up that paper afterwards and you just get rid of it. So the purpose is not to go back and reread your notes later, obviously, because they're not there. The purpose is just to, as you're writing down, you're creating some separation between me and my thoughts and emotions. And so that helps create a bit of a choice point too. You realize that you are not your thoughts and emotions. They come through you, but you can separate yourself from them. And the more you write, the more you realize one moment I'm feeling elated and another moment I'm feeling depressed, and they go up and down. So these are two different types of writing or journaling that we might encourage people to try out.
Those are great examples. I haven't tried the expressive journaling where you rip it up, but I do try to sort of tap in and journal and just sort of reflect my inner thoughts out. I try to do that in the mornings. I don't do it every mornings. I do teach as part of my programs that people should journal. And I want to say that there's a real link between, we do a lot on computers. So people, tend to want to put things onto a computer that it's easy to find. But there's something special that happens in the brain when you actually physically write something and you physically start to write on paper. That connects differently into your brain, and your brain, especially if you're writing, affirmations, or, I know that if you do a retrospective at the end of the day and you write down, well, I noticed I went unconscious at these times, or I noticed I reacted during these times, and I'd love to have done this. My intention for tomorrow is to do this instead. And if you write that down, and we talked about glimmers, I think in an earlier session, you write down those glimmers that you're seeing and those things that you're doing well, and you're writing that down physically with a pen and paper, then your brain tends to look at that differently, and it fires new neurons in a new way, and it can reinforce what you're trying to do personally and what you're thinking personally. So that writing piece, I think, is really important. And I was looking around for it when you were talking, but one of the the writing was a little hard for me initially, but one of the areas that I got into was using a journal called the 5-minute journal, which was a super easy way of just recognizing, setting an intention in the morning, and recognizing at the end of the day, doing a retrospective about how I feel, and then setting an intention for the next day. So that 5-minute journal is pretty easy to get on Amazon. So if anybody needs some structure and needs this to be literally 5 minutes because they feel like they don't have enough time to maybe spend time reflecting, then that's an easy way to do it. And add it into your calendar. Like put 10 minutes in before you start work, 10 minutes in at the end of your workday, or even 5 minutes, and just sort of set that in as a reminder. That helps you remember to do it as well. So that's awesome. So we've shared another tool, and all of the tools I think that we've shared along the way. The quick coherence method is really great as well. I think all of these tools, if you can start to put them into play in your daily life and take action, then that's going to help everybody just make those incremental changes. And so this is our 4th conversation. So we would love to hear from everybody. Have you started to practice any of these tools? How is it feeling for you? What are you noticing? Do you have any questions that we can help address in the future sessions? Definitely put some comments on the video, and let us hear how you're doing and hear what you want to hear more of, and we'll try to address your comments and questions in future sessions. But I think that's it for today. Suzanne, any final comments?
No, that's it. Yeah, we would definitely love to hear from people.
Okay. All right. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.